Hello everyone. Today's video is going to be a little bit different from the usual gaming news. I want to kind of give my honest thoughts and opinions on where I personally think the gaming industry is at right now. Now, I have done a couple videos like this in the past talking about how the gaming industry worries me and all that stuff, and I kind of want to do another video where I talk about where I personally think the gaming industry is at. And I am pretty curious, I'm sorry for stuttering. I am curious to also know what you folks think about where you think the gaming industry is at as well. Now, just a little heads up, I'm going to be kicking things into overdrive this early, and I know I'm going to be going overboard with this discussion, and this might be a little bit of an overkill for me, but with all honesty, I still feel like this needs to be addressed and this needs to be said because the gaming industry is just in a complete shit spot and it's just not doing too well. It just seems like every single time a game gets released now, it's just either buggy, broken, or straight up unplayable at release, or the game will launch and it will have a bunch of pay to win microtransactions that nobody wants, or the worst case in scenario, the game will probably launch in an unfinished state with no content at launch, and then 3 years later, or half a year later, the game will get all the content by the end of the year when everyone just pretty much abandoned the game just outright entirely. And I'm not going to be talking about like the smaller games, of course. Now, I know before I get carried away here, I'm going to try to catch myself here. Some of you are going to try to tell me, well, Nightwing, hold on, slow your horses down, buddy. You got to be fair here. There are some good games out there. Yes, to be fair, Nightwing, there are some bad games, but there are still a good handful of games out there. So slow your horses down there, bucko. And here's my response to that statement. Yes, to be fair, there are a good handful of games out there. You know, we had games like Wargroove, which I definitely showcased some gameplay of on the channel, and I'm excited for the second one coming out. And then we got games like Dragon Quest, and then we got games like Smite, and then we got other games like Cult of the Lamb, which are all genuinely fun games and everything. But the gameplay that you're seeing on screen is Ape Escape 2, which is a game from like the PS2, which I'm playing on my PS4 right now. The games that I just mentioned to you, like Cult of the Lamb, Ape Escape 2, and Smite, they are all genuinely fun games. And I shouldn't have to go back to the older titles in today's date for modern gaming. I should be realistically playing the newer titles on my newer consoles, but I don't. And I do have a PS5, but I don't have any newer gen games on there. The only games I have on my PS5 are the older games that I play, like Ape Escape 2, Jack and Dexter, some of my older PS4 games, like Elden Ring, for example. And trust me, I have a bit to say about AAA games as well, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But I have older games on my PS4 and or that I play on my PS5. Hell, I have games from my PS2 that I play on my PS4 and PS5 that were like multiple console generations ago. And the fact that I actually get a better AAA experience by playing the older title games much more than playing the newer AAA games, that should never happen. The fact that I actually can get a AAA experience by playing the older titles instead of getting a AAA experience from the newer titles, that's not a really good sign. That's just really, really bad for the current state of where these games are at. And again, stuff like this should never happen in the game industry but unfortunately, that's kind of where I'm at for these video games. This is where I'm at for modern gaming because again, most of these games that come out now are just not fun anymore. Which leads me to my next point for AAA game releases and everything. It just seems like every single time a AAA game gets released now is just not fun anymore because games like Call of Duty or games like Madden that get released every single year just either has no content at launch and the game gets fixed over 6 months, if not 2 years by now, when the game should have been fixed at launch. And there are multiple problems with these games for the first few months, and the game becomes pretty much unplayable when it comes to online play because of server issues. And it just seems like there's no point of playing these games because the content that was promised was either falsely advertised or was not brought into the game like promised. Let's look back at games like Cyberpunk, for example. That game was so bad, it was removed from the PlayStation digital stores for several months, and then CD Projekt Red was subjected to put themselves back on crunch time to get the game back into the state that it was originally promised in, and then that's when the game was brought back. And at this point, it just doesn't seem like these AAA companies just don't even try anymore. Like, do they even try to even get games out anymore that are actually polished or playable? No, because they know they can easily make a quick buck and they can easily scam people out of their money because they know there will be fanboys out there that defend this crap and they'll be like, oh, but Nightwing, this Call of Duty's better than the last year. It has a better multiplayer experience. The campaign is much better than the last year. Or, but Nightwing, you're being such a hypocrite, bro. Stop being so hard on these game developers. They need more time to work on these games. Well, here's my response to that little statement. For all I care, these AAA companies can go shove rocks up their asses because they clearly have the time and the money and they have all the resources that they need. But the problem is, they just don't care. They don't care enough to try to put any effort into these games. They don't care to put more time into making these games better. And if they did care, and if they truly did have the time and effort, I hope you know there's a thing called delaying a game, and game developers have the right to delay a game. You could make the argument and say that they have to reach these deadlines at a certain threshold in the year, but at the end of the day, as long as the product comes out better from these delays, the games would actually be worth it and people would actually play it and they would actually enjoy it and they could make up all that lost revenue that the company wanted so badly. But no, instead, what ends up happening instead is that these developers will just release these games unfinished and they won't even bother trying to make the games better because they know they can get away with this shit. They know that they can get away with this kind of crap and they know they can get away with this kind of business practice and marketing scam. And it's gotten so bad, it's gotten to the point where people are now going to question these AAA game releases coming out every year. Like, games like Call of Duty and games like Madden that are just a copy and paste every single year. And people just wonder, like, when did these games just get so fucking awful? And when did these games just get so mediocre at best? And why do these developers not put any time and effort into these games? I hope you guys can know that we as a customer and as a player can demand that these companies do a better job. We can demand that these companies do better. But instead, what ends up happening is that nobody calls this problem out really anymore, and no one really calls out these companies for these kind of moves. I don't know if I'm the only human being on the planet that thinks this. I don't know if I'm the only person calling out these problems, but seeing the direction that the game industry has gone in with all of these problems, it just makes me sad to see, man. And knowing that the game industry has all these problems and it's gone down this path, it just, again, it makes me sad to see all this happening. I remember playing games on my Xbox 360. I remember playing games like Black Ops 2 and Gears of War 3. When you plug those games into the console, they had all the content there at launch, and they were all enjoyable to play. But no, now game developers just release games unfinished, and if you talk about this kind of stuff, people will look at you like if you have two heads, especially now that taking time to work on these games is just pretty much extinct. Don't get me wrong, there are still some fantastic games out there. Games like Wargroove, or games like Cult of the Lamb, like I mentioned already, and then we also got fun other games as well, like the Fire Emblem franchise, the Super Mario franchise, and then we got other games like Dragon Quest from Square Enix, which I personally think is awesome. Don't get me wrong, there are still some pretty good games out there too, but seeing a good game like that is just so rare. It's like finding a goddamn unicorn just sleeping next to a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and it's just so rare to get a good game like that. And unfortunately, the gaming industry, in my opinion, is still in a massive rut, and it makes me sad. Now, again, don't get me wrong, there are still some good games out there, but they're just not given enough credit. And that's a shame because I want these games to get the credit they deserve. It's pretty much up to like the smaller indie developer companies at this point. It's pretty much up to like the indie developers to take up that mantle and try to hold on to that little bit of hope for the game industry and actually make good games, because there are still some people in like the game industry, like indie developers, that actually do care about making fun games and everything. Games like BattleBit Remastered, they were made like by 3 people and probably in their goddamn bedrooms, and that became a massive hit, and it's much better than Call of Duty, and it's a game that people really enjoy. BattleBit Remastered is a small game made by a few people, and they actually make it far better than Call of Duty nowadays. Games like that deserve more praise and deserve more attention. And like I said already, it just feels like it's up to the indie developers or the smaller developers to take up that mantle and try to hold on to the last bit of hope that we have for like modern gaming nowadays. And unfortunately, it's just not looking too good. So, I don't know. I figured I make this video because I just wanted to give my thoughts and opinions on where I think the gaming industry is at. I know this was a bit much, but I just felt like I needed to come on here and get this out of the way and talk about it. So, I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think the game industry's in a good spot? Do you think it's in a bad spot? Let me know in the comments down below. I am pretty curious to see your responses to all that. So, with that being said, thank you everybody for watching and for listening. I know I gone a little bit overboard in this video, and I apologize for that, but I just felt like it needed to be said. So, thank you everyone for watching and listening. I apologize for rambling. And until next time, I'm talking about where I personally think the gaming industry is at, and I'm giving my thoughts and opinions. And I'll see you all later.